Roar!
Ew.
Hello and welcome to Midnight Readings. Today we will be reading Sniffles, written by Crackling Moron. Sabotage! Betrayal! An underhoofed attempt to delay my terrible and inevitable revenge! Crysalis would have continued, no doubt, with this particular line of ranting, had she not sneezed so suddenly and so violently that she was propelled back into a veritable eager of pillows and cushions that had been set up around and behind her, disappearing from view in an avalanche of softness. "You're ill," Richard said, entering bearing a tray.
"A queen does not get ill,"
came an angry, regal voice from somewhere amidst all the cushions, followed shortly by an annoyed-looking chrysalis digging herself to freedom. She'd likely have stormed across the room to properly explain how a queen does not get ill, but the sheer amount of duvets and blankets that had been laid over precluded her this. So really, her staying in the bed was just practical. That was all. She did continue to glare at Richard, though, as he busied himself about the room, which was not dissipated, as it had once been. He fussed with this, he fussed with that. He singularly failed to fuss over the most important thing present, though, and that was her. Idiot. He was lucky she put up with him. "Where are my soldiers?" she yelled, throwing a cushion at him and missing. Not because of the illness, because she wasn't ill, but because the cushion was aerodynamically flawed. Had it been a proper cushion, of the sort actually intended for use by a queen, she would have hit her target, which had been Richard's head. Still got his attention, though, and got him to pick up the tray from where he'd sat it and finish carrying it over to her bed and lay it in front of her. "All present and correct, Your Majesty," he said, indicating the serene ranks of neatly cut toast that was accompanying her boiled egg. Chrysalis didn't look at these, though, and kept her narrowed eyes on Richard, paid to remind him who was boss. "I take it you remembered to remove the crust this time?" she asked. The last time he had failed to do this, and had put him on thin ice indeed. His pathetic excuses that she hadn't asked for that, and how was he supposed to know, had cut no mustard whatsoever. He should have known. Richard, for his part, just kept on smiling that infuriating, indulgent smile of his, as though he was somehow enjoying this, as though his very life was not on the line. "Of course, only the best for the queen," he said. Chrysalis kept glaring, not pouting. A queen does not pout, and allowed herself a single glance down at the tray to verify. In this glance, she saw that he had indeed removed the crusts. What's more, he'd also lined the toast up precisely the way she liked it done. How he'd managed to guess that was unclear. But good, he should. "You shall live another day," she said, pointing a warning hoof at him before fluffing back into the pillows and dragging the tray a little closer to herself. Richard gave a bow that he had previously assured Chrysalis was not a mocking one. It was just the human style, honest. "That's good to know. Do you need any help?" he asked. Chrysalis bristled. "Help? Help! A queen gives commands, and those commands are obeyed without question. A queen does not ask for help. Certainly not the most friendlish, brilliant, Actually, she had been attempting to levitate and use the knife that had been provided to take the top off the egg, but using her magic was, for whatever reason, causing the most aggravating tickle in her nose, was providing some sort of a distraction. Anytime she got close, the tickle would rise up to levels that threatened a sneeze, and she kept having to pull back, concentration slipping, and meaning she had to readjust her grip. Aggravating. "You made this egg too difficult to open. Crack! Take the top off. Whatever. Just do it for me," she said, thrusting the knife in Richard's direction and folding her legs in a huff. Richard took the knife, which had been offered to him blade first, but that wasn't a huge surprise, and swiftly cut the top off the egg. It was, as ever, perfectly runny, but then she would have expected nothing less. And he had to be good for something, she supposed. There you go. Is there anything else? Help with dunking? Briefly, very briefly, she did actually consider it, given that with her magic acting up, for some reason, sabotage, plots, it might be easier with him and his hands to handle the soldiers and the egg. But then she realized what she was considering, and the mere thought shook her to the core. No! She borderline shrieked, pulling the tray even closer, till all but wrapping herself around it. Or at least as much as she could, tucked in and snuggled up as she was. Richard just nodded. As you wish. I'll leave you to it then, Your Majesty, he said, before leaving her to it and getting back to fussing about the room. Fussing was about more or less Richard's sole purpose in life. He said it was just a job. And sometimes he did because he felt it was the nice thing to do. But Chrysalis knew better. He'd been here to fuss, and specifically put here to fuss for her benefit. He handled all the mundane, dull, minor, trivialing tasks that a queen had no business dirtying herself with, like preparing eggs and soldiers, for example, and dusting, and sweeping up rubble into neater piles, and all those other things that somehow always needed doing. With him fulfilling his purpose, Chrysalis herself was free to fulfill hers, being sublime, and in this instance, plotting revenge, of course. Though all that could wait until after breakfast at least. No sense in planning on an empty stomach. Although eggs wasn't all that would be needed for that to be the case, strictly speaking, it was unlikely that they were even needed at all. She just liked them, and Richard seemed happy to provide. It was not the only thing he was curiously happy to provide either. Richard! She trilled, having just polished off the first soldier. The colonel always take out the leadership first, and licking away what few remnants she might have missed. Richard, Miss Fuss, turned around. Come here. He did as he was told, one of his few redeeming features. Yes? He asked from the bedside. Come closer. Richard knew better than to roll his eyes. It was important that, even if he did know what was going on, and he did, he acted as though he didn't. It was just part of the process. The process was expert manipulation. It didn't carry quite the same satisfaction if you knew the other side was just playing along. Leaning on the bed, he drew in closer to where Chrysalis had settled, using some of that freakish height to get himself into whispering distance. Yes? He asked again, ear cocked. Chrysalis cleared her throat, having to deal with a brief minor coughing fit, on account of all the lowly sabotage, and then leaned in so that her mouth was basically right by his ear, and then, Your breakfast was adequate, Richard, he said, which seemed about the highest level acceptable praise. And there came from Richard that sickly, inexplicable little lurch of affection that was always just lying in wait beneath the surface. It was like wringing out a sponge. Just took a little effort and it all came out. It wasn't love per se, and honestly, Chrysalis had no idea how to even attempt to cultivate and extract love from a creature as bizarrely singular as Richard. Not did she really want any idea. The mere thought made her flesh crawl beneath her carapace. But it did the job well enough for now. Filled a hole, as it were. Never took much, either, which was lucky. Human emotions were unusual. It was one of those things where, after having some, you were never quite sure whether you actually enjoyed the flavour or not. And the more you thought about it, the more you felt you'd need just a touch to refresh your memory. Only you never got any closer to a proper conclusion. Moreish, but not because you actively enjoy it. Or maybe you did, or maybe you didn't, and just weren't sure yet. It was, like him, infuriating. But, as said, it filled a hole, and that was all that mattered. And the moment that hole was filled, she pushed him away. "Stop crowding me, Richard!" Grinning like an idiot, he was stood back up from the bed and gave another more curt bow. "My apologies, Your Majesty." "Don't you have something to dust?" Chrysalis asked, mouth full of another soldier, reaching for the next. "As you wish." And a dusting he went, mixed in with some general tidying that also took him out of the room. Not that Chrysalis cared about that, obviously. The only part of it she cared about was that, with him out of the way, when she finished the eggs and soldiers, she had to move the tray off the bed herself, and with her magic being unduly weakened, by sabotage, not by illness, she had to do it by hoof, and that was inelegant and thoroughly unbecoming of a queen. He'd pay for that later. He'd probably arranged it that way on purpose. With that done, she was left sitting on the bed on her own, a situation that quickly becomes utterly intolerable. She couldn't afford to just sit around. She had things to do, schemes to perfect, plots to hatch, horrible fates to properly plan out for each and every enemy she had, which was, at last count, everyone on the face of the planet barring herself. Richard was at the end of the list, because she'd need him for tasks until his turn came around. She hadn't quite worked out what his fate should be, yet, but she was sure she'd get onto it in time. And she had time. "Richard! Richard! Get back here at once!" she yelled, to be no immediate response. Casting about for something to throw that would break in satisfying manner, she found annoyingly everything out of reach, and when she tried to magic something a little closer, it just set off more sneezes, resulting in her getting lost in bedclothes again. By the time she'd clawed herself free, Richard was again standing by the bed, looking smug. Chrysalis wasn't going to let that ruffle her. "Where is my revenge journal?" she snapped. Richard frowned, concerned, moving in to better adjust her cushions and pillows. "I don't think you should be plotting revenge in your condition, Your Majesty. You should be resting. I'm sure you can resume plotting tomorrow when you feel a little better." "How dare you presume to tell a queen what to do? You dare to—" "Ooh, that's warm. What's that?" she asked, derailing as something that Richard did or was doing led to the most wonderful sensation of warmth suddenly becoming apparent. "That would be a hot water bottle," he said, continuing to adjust. Eyes now lidded, Chrysalis felt herself sinking into the bedding. "Ooh, what was I saying?" she asked. All that sabotage had left her with a little thick in her head, and was now combining with warmth of this hot water bottle to leave her unexpectedly snoozy. "You were berating me, Your Majesty," Richard said. That did sound right, she had to admit. "I was? About what?" she asked, cracking one eye to peer at him. At which point she noticed, berately, never usually seeing much point in paying attention to him, that he had put his coat on. This made her immediately sit bolt upright. Putting his coat on meant going outside, meant leaving. "Where are you going? Are you leaving? Why would you leave me?" she asked, getting shrill enough at the end to catch her own attention. That needed quick addressing. Not that what matters. "I don't need you or anything else. I am alone sufficient, more than sufficient." Richard gently eased her back down into a more comfortable position. She allowed him to do this and did not bite his hand off, because she was feeling particularly magmacious that day, and because his eggs had been adequate. "Oh, undoubtedly, Your Majesty." "Don't you remember who I am?" "How could I forget?" he asked in turn, tucking the duvet up around her so that it was just the right level of snug. Bewildered and cocooned, Chrysalis could only just about muster. "Then why are you—" Richard did not force her to flounder much further. "Just going for a walk, not leaving. Just stretching my legs and checking all is as it should be in the surroundings. Then I'll come back," he said. Still smiling, the idiot smile, Chrysalis found herself smiling too. Just a little bit. Relieved, Well, not relieved, because to be relieved would have been you'd have to be worried. And she hadn't been worried. So just a smile of something. Satisfaction, probably. She did have a lot to be satisfied about, after all. So that would make sense. Oh, okay. I mean, yes, good. As you should. In fact, you should already be out there. Stop dawdling, Richard. And she would have pointedly, impartially at him, but her legs were all tucked in too snugly to allow for that. He gave another bow. As you wish, he said. There's some water for you there. I put it in reaching distance. It's important for you to keep drinking, Your Majesty. Okay, Richard. Chrysalis said with a yawn, eyes fluttering shut as she rolled over. Seeing this, Richard smiled again, and again some of that weird, cloying, alien affection just rolled over her, and Chrysalis smiled again too. He'd made it all the way to the door before she piped up once more. Richard? Yes, Your Majesty. Come here. He did as he was told, leaning in, getting closer, cocking an ear. Yes? You're performing marginally better than I have expected. During this period of sabotage-induced weakness, Chrysalis murmured, unable to look at him as she spoke the words, lapping up that affection again, trying to work out whether she actually liked it or not. She really couldn't pin it down. I try, Your Majesty. Will that be all? She thought about it, all snug, fed, with her hot water bottle. Comfy. Yes, but you are coming back, she asked. Just so she could factor it into her plans, of course. Yes, he said. Factored in? He wouldn't lie to her after all. He was too stupid to lie to her. And he always did come back. Good. Go away, Richard, she said, yawning more deeply this time, and burrowing down into the pillows. As you wish. Ah, that was a fun one. That was Sniffles, written by Crackling Moron. Oh, Chrissy. They're adorable. I know one person who would love to take the picture of Richard, take the place of Richard, if words were my friend. Hope you have an awesome day, and keep watching that moon. And a howling thank you to my Patreons.